On a distant planet, far beyond the reaches of Earth, there was a place called Xandar. It was a planet of ancient traditions, mysterious rituals, and strange beauty. For many years, the Xandari people had lived under the rule of their royal family. But there was one member of the royal family who was unlike the others, a princess, who was hidden away from the world. Her name was Alara, but no one ever saw her face. Alara was known as the Veiled Princess, and the veil she wore was a symbol of both beauty and sorrow. The princess was said to be a mystery, an enigma that no one could fully understand. The people of Xandari believed that whoever could prove their worth would be granted the privilege of marrying her. But for centuries, no one had ever succeeded in the trials that were set before them. Many tried, but all failed. No one had ever been able to win her heart or even see her face. The palace where Alara lived was grand and majestic, hidden away deep in the mountains of Xandari. The land around it was harsh and untamed, with thick forests and treacherous cliffs. The people who lived nearby whispered tales of the princess's beauty, but no one had ever seen her. Some said she was too perfect for anyone to touch, while others believed that she had been cursed. But the truth was far more complicated than the stories that were told. Alara was not some untouchable being. She was a woman trapped in a world of expectations and rules. The veil she wore was not just for beauty, it was a reminder of the pain and loss she had suffered in her life. Long ago, she had been promised to another, but that promise had been broken. The man she had once loved betrayed her, and since that day, Alara had remained in the shadows, hidden away from the world. Her people believed that no one was worthy of her, so they locked her away, waiting for someone who could truly prove themselves. Meanwhile, on a far-off planet, a human soldier named Leo had just arrived on Xandari. Leo was not like the other men who had come to seek the princess. He was not rich, powerful, or of noble birth. He was a simple soldier, sent on a mission to negotiate with the Xandari people. But as soon as he heard about the veiled princess, something stirred inside him. Leo was not interested in power or wealth. He did not care about being the one to win the princess's hand. What caught his attention was the idea of a woman who had been hidden away for so long. A woman who was surrounded by mystery and legend. Leo had never been one to follow the rules or back down from a challenge. He had seen too much of the galaxy to be afraid of legends or ancient customs. As he walked through the bustling streets of the Xandari city, he overheard the whispers about the princess. "No one has ever seen her," one man said. "She's a prize for the strongest and the bravest." Leo was not impressed by the stories. He had fought in wars and faced dangerous enemies. But something about Alara's story intrigued him. He wanted to know who she really was, not just the legend others spoke of. One evening, Leo stood outside the palace gates, watching the majestic structure in the distance. The gates were tall and guarded, but there was something in the air that made him feel a strange pull toward it. He knew the trials for the princess's hand were difficult. Many had tried and failed, but Leo was determined. He was not afraid of the challenge. In fact, he was eager to prove that he could succeed where others had not. Who would want to marry a princess behind a veil? He muttered to himself. Would want to win a woman they couldn't even see? But in the back of his mind, Leo realized that it wasn't just about winning. It was about understanding. The stories of Alara had made him curious, and he wanted to learn more about her. He didn't care about the challenge or the riches. He just wanted to meet the person behind the veil. The next day, Leo went to the city's elder council, where the leaders of Xandari gathered. He had to convince them to allow him to meet the princess. Many of the elders looked at him with suspicion. "You are not of our kind," one elder said, his eyes narrowing. "You do not understand our ways. You will never succeed." Leo stood tall, unshaken. "Maybe I don't understand your ways," he said. "But I do understand one thing now. One has ever even tried. I'm not here for power. I'm here because I want to meet the princess. I believe she deserves to be seen by the world, just like anyone else." The elders stared at him for a long moment, his eyes studying Leo carefully. Finally, he nodded. "If you are willing to take on the trials, then we will allow you to try. But no one has ever succeeded. Not once." Leo smiled, determination shining in his eyes. Then it's about time someone did. As Leo left the council hall, he felt a sense of excitement building inside him. He knew the path ahead would be difficult, but he was ready. He wasn't just going to meet a princess, he was going to change the way the galaxy saw her. Maybe, just maybe, he would be the one to finally lift the veil. The sun was setting over the tall mountains of Zandari as Leo prepared for the trials. He stood in the palace courtyard, watching as the last rays of light faded away. The city around him was quiet now, but the energy in the air was thick with anticipation. It was the first time in a long while that someone had dared to take on the trials for Princess Alara. Leo felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. He had never been one to back down from a challenge, but this was different. The trials were said to be impossible, and many before him had failed. Yet Leo was determined to prove that he could succeed where others had not. He had never been afraid of difficult tasks, and this time would be no different. The trials were a series of tests, each designed to test the strength, wisdom, and courage of the suitors. But Leo wasn't just thinking about the prize at the end, he was thinking about the princess. He wanted to understand her, not as a legend or a mystery, but as a person. He didn't want to win her hand for power or glory. He simply wanted to meet her and see who she truly was. The first trial was known as the Labyrinth of Shadows. It was a maze, filled with traps and illusions designed to test the mental and physical limits of those who entered.
Many had entered,
but none had made it through. Some said it was impossible to find the way out. Others said the labyrinth was cursed. Leo stood at the entrance, looking into the dark maze ahead. The walls were tall and covered with strange symbols that seemed to move in the dim light. He could hear the whispers of the Zandari elders behind him, watching, waiting to see if he would succeed or fail. But Leo wasn't focused on them. He was focused on the maze. Taking a deep breath, he stepped forward, his boots crunching against the gravel beneath him. The air was cool, and the shadows seemed to stretch out before him, hiding the true path. Leo knew that the only way through was to trust his instincts. He'd faced challenges before, but this was different. This was not a fight, but a test. Of his mind, the maze twisted and turned, and every path seemed to lead to a dead end. Leo could feel the weight of the trial on his shoulders, but he pushed forward. As he moved deeper into the labyrinth, he began to notice something. Strange voices whispered from the walls, trying to confuse him. They told him that he would never find his way out, that he was not worthy, that he should give up. But Leo didn't listen. He had faced worse in his life, and had always found a way through. As he continued, he remembered the words of the Zandari elder: only those with true courage and wisdom will survive the trials. He wasn't here just for himself, he was here for Alara, to prove that he wasn't afraid of the unknown. Hours passed, and Leo began to feel the exhaustion set in. His muscles ached, and his mind started to play tricks on him. The walls seemed to close in, and the darkness felt heavier. But just as he was about to give in, he spotted something glimmering in the distance, a faint light coming from the end of the path. It was the first sign of hope he had seen in hours. With renewed strength, Leo rushed toward the light. The path grew clearer, and the shadows seemed to fade. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he reached the end of the labyrinth. He stepped out into the open air, breathing deeply, his heart racing. The Zandari elders, who had been watching from a distance, stepped forward, their faces unreadable. Leo stood tall, his eyes focused on the path ahead, but he could see the flicker of surprise in the elders' eyes. No one had ever made it through the labyrinth before. You have done what no one else has, one of the elders said, his voice heavy with respect. You have passed the first trial, Leo nodded. But he wasn't satisfied. The labyrinth was only the beginning. He still had 2 more trials to complete before he could meet Princess Alara, but the first victory gave him the confidence he needed to continue. The second trial was a test of wisdom and compassion. It was said that no one could pass this trial without understanding the true nature of the Zandari people. The trial would take place in the sacred grove, a place of great spiritual significance to the Chandra. As Leo made his way to the sacred grove, he thought about what had happened so far. The labyrinth had been difficult, but it had also taught him something important. Sometimes the greatest challenges weren't the ones you could see. They were the ones that tested your heart, your mind, in your spirit. When Leo entered the sacred grove, he was greeted by an ancient tree at the sang Tur of the Clearing. The tree was said to be the oldest living thing on Zandari, and it was believed to hold the wisdom of the entire planet. The task was simple. Leo had to ask the tree a question, and the tree would provide him with an answer. But the challenge was not in the question, it was in how he asked it. Leo knew that the answer would not come easily. It wasn't about finding a solution to a problem, but about understanding the deeper meaning behind his question. He had to ask from his heart. Standing before the tree, Leo closed his eyes and thought carefully. He wasn't just seeking wisdom for himself. He was seeking understanding for Alara. He asked, "What is it that people fail to see in those they hide away?" The tree's branches swayed in the wind, and a soft voice seemed to echo from the leaves. What is hidden can only be seen by those who are willing to look beyond the surface. True wisdom comes not from sight, but from the heart. Leo opened. His eyes and a sense of peace washed over him. He had passed the trial, but more importantly, he had learned something valuable. It wasn't enough to be strong or smart. He needed to see the world through a different lens, one that looked past appearances and into the soul. With 2 trials down, Leo was closer to his goal, but he knew that the hardest test was yet to come. He was ready to face whatever lay ahead, not for himself, but for the princess who had been hidden away for so long. Leo stood at the edge of the 3rd trial, his heart pounding with excitement and uncertainty. He had passed the first 2 trials. He had navigated the labyrinth of shadows and shown wisdom in the sacred grove. But the final trial was said to be the most difficult. The last test, known as the trial of courage, would not only challenge his physical strength, but also his deepest fears. It was said that those who faced this trial often saw things that shook them to their core, things they would never forget. Leo wasn't sure what awaited him, but he was determined to face whatever came next. He had already made it this far, and he wasn't about to give up now as he walked toward the clearing where the trial would take place. Leo thought about everything he had learned so far. The journey had been difficult, but it had also opened his eyes to the true nature of the Zandari people. He had seen how their customs and traditions were deeply tied to their history and beliefs. And most importantly, he had begun to understand Alara not as a princess locked away in a tower, but as a woman who had suffered and been hidden away. For far too long, the trial was held in a place known as the Cavern of Echoes, a deep, dark cave where strange sounds could be heard echoing from the walls. It was said that the cavern was alive with memories of the past, and those who entered would be forced to confront their worst fears and regrets. Leo wasn't sure what to expect, but he knew that if he wanted to prove himself worthy of Alara, he would have to face whatever came his way. As Leo entered the cavern, the air grew cold, and the darkness seemed to swallow him whole. His footsteps echoed in the stillness, and for a moment, he felt as if he were walking into the heart of the unknown. The further he walked, the more he felt the weight of the cavern pressing down on him. It was as if the walls were alive, watching, waiting. Suddenly, a voice broke the silence. "Why do you think you are worthy, human?" Leo froze. The voice came from nowhere, but it felt real, like it was coming from the very walls of the cavern itself. He had expected the trial to be difficult, but he hadn't expected this. The voice was cold and unyielding, but Leo didn't flinch. "I don't think I'm worthy," he said, his voice steady. "I'm here because I believe everyone deserves a chance. Alara deserves to be seen, not just as a princess, but as a person. And I want to prove that I can see her, truly see her." The voice seemed to laugh, a low, mocking sound that echoed through the cavern. "You think that by completing these trials, you will earn her favor? Do you not understand the weight of the customs you are defying? You are not the first to seek her hand. Many have come before you, and none have succeeded." Leo's heart skipped a beat. He knew the voice was right. Many had come before him, and all had failed. But that didn't mean he would. He couldn't give up now. "I'm not here to prove anything to anyone," he said firmly. "I'm here because I believe that Alara deserves more than this. She deserves someone who will see her for who she truly is, not just as a prize to be won." The voice grew softer, almost as if it were considering his words. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the walls of the cavern began to shimmer, and the echoes of the past filled the air. Leo was no longer alone. In front of him appeared a Vishuna, vision of Alara, but this time she was not veiled. Her face was clear, her eyes filled with sadness and longing. She stood alone, surrounded by shadows, her hands outstretched as if reaching for something. Her voice echoed in the cavern, but it was not the voice Leo had heard before. This was a voice of pain, a voice filled with unspoken words. "Why did they hide me?" Alara's voice asked, her words barely a whisper. "Why did they keep me in the shadows?" Leo felt a sharp pang in his chest. The vision of Alara was unlike anything he had ever seen. She wasn't just a princess, she was a woman who had been trapped by her own people's customs, a woman who had been kept in the dark for far too long. And in that moment, Leo understood. He understood the pain she had endured, the isolation she had suffered, and the fear that had kept her hidden from the world. "I'm sorry," Leo whispered, his voice filled with emotion. "I didn't know." The vision of Alara didn't respond. Instead, the cavern began to shift, and the shadows surrounding her grew darker, more oppressive. Leo reached out, desperate to help her, but as his hand neared, the vision faded, and he was left standing alone in the cavern once again. The voice returned, its tone different, now less mocking, more thoughtful. "Ah, you have seen what many cannot. You have seen the truth behind the veil. But can you live with what you know?" Leo took a deep breath, his heart heavy with the weight of the vision he had just witnessed. The truth was painful, but it was also liberating. He wasn't just here to win a princess. He was here to free her from the chains that had bound her for so long. "I can," Leo said firmly. "I'm not afraid of the truth. I'm ready to face whatever comes next. And I'm ready to help." The cavern fell silent once more. Then, with a loud crack, the path forward was revealed. Leo stepped forward, feeling a sense of purpose that he hadn't felt before. The trial was not just about proving his strength, it was about understanding the truth, facing the darkness, and finding the courage to change it. Leo had faced the trials with strength, wisdom, and determination, but he hadn't expected what came next. After passing the labyrinth of shadows, the sacred grove, and the cavern of echoes, he had thought that the hardest part was behind him. But what awaited him now was not another physical challenge, but a test of trust, loyalty, and leadership. It was a betrayal, one that came from an unexpected place. Leo and his small group of allies, his fellow soldiers, had journeyed far together, each one playing their part in the trials. But it wasn't until the final trial that things began to unravel. They had spent days preparing for the last challenge, which would lead them to an audience with Princess Alara. The Zandari people had kept their eyes on them, and Leo had grown to trust his companions, believing that they all shared the same goal: to complete the trials and show Alara that not all people were bound by the traditions that held her captive. However, as Leo and his team made their way through the final stretch toward the palace, one of his closest allies, Yarek, began to act strangely. Yarek had always been quiet, keeping to himself during their journey. But Leo had never suspected him of anything more than the usual soldier's distance. But now, something in Yarek's eyes seemed different, darker, almost calculating. It happened one night as they camped in the hills outside the palace. The fire was crackling, and the rest of the group had settled down to sleep. But Leo couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He had been trained to trust his instincts, and his instincts told him that he was being watched. He stepped away from the campfire to gather his thoughts. He found Jarek standing alone, staring into the night. "Jarek," Leo called, approaching cautiously. "Everything all right?" Yash turned slowly, and for a moment, Leo saw something cold in his eyes, something that hadn't been there before. "I'm fine," Yarek said, his voice flat. "Just thinking." Leo didn't believe him. There was something off about Yarek's tone, something he couldn't place. But before he could say anything else, Yarek quickly turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving Leo with more questions than answers. The next morning, the group made their way toward the palace gates. Leo's mind was still on Yarek, but he pushed the thought aside. They were so close to the end of the trials soon. They would meet Alara, and everything would change. But as they approached the gates, the betrayal hit. Leo heard a commotion. Behind him, followed by the unmistakable sound of blaster fire. Spinning around, he saw Yarrick, standing with a group of armed Zandari soldiers, all pointing their weapons at Leo and his team. Betrayal was complete. You've done well too. Get this far, human, Yarrick said. His voice now laced with disdain. But you're not going to get any further. You think you can change things here? You're just a fool. Leo's heart sank as he realized the full extent of Yarrick's treachery. The entire journey had been a trap. Yarrick had been working with the Zandari all along, pretending to be one of them, gaining their trust so he could stop Leo from reaching the princess. It wasn't about proving himself worthy anymore. It was about power, and Yarrick had no intention of letting Leo succeed. You can't do this, Leo said, stepping forward. We've come this far, all of us, to show her that she doesn't have to hide, that she's more than just a prize. This isn't the way, Yarrick sneered at him. You're naive, Leo. You don't understand. Lara doesn't want your help. She's just a tool for our people's power. You're the fool for thinking you could change that. Leo's fists clenched. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. All the trials, the struggle, the bond he had built with Yard, everything had been a lie. But Leo wasn't going to back down. He wouldn't let Yarrick and the Zandari stop him from what he believed was right. You're wrong, Leo said, his voice steady. Alara deserves more than this. She deserves a choice, and I'm not leaving until she gets it. The tension in the air was thick, and Leo could feel the eyes of his remaining comrades on him. They were outnumbered, and Yarrick's soldiers were well armed. But Leo's resolve was stronger than ever. He'd come too far to let this end in betrayal. He wouldn't fight Jareknot if it meant hurting the very cause he was fighting for. Instead, Leo made a decision. He would have to outsmart them, find another way to get to the princess. Tell the Zandari that they can imprison me, but they'll never control me, Leo said, his voice full of conviction. Before Yarrick could react, Leo quickly signaled too. His team, they weren't entirely without options. In the chaos of the moment, Leo's comrades managed to create a diversion, allowing Leo to slip past the guards and make his way to the palace alone. His heart was racing, but he was determined. The betrayal stung, but it only fueled his resolve. He would meet Alara, and he would free her from the chains that had bound her for so long. As Leo ran toward the palace, he couldn't help but feel a sense of clarity. The fight ahead wasn't about completing the trials or proving his worth. It was about Alara's freedom. It wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for her. He would face whatever came next, no matter the cost. Leo's heart raced as he ran through the palace corridors. The betrayal of Yarrick still stung in his mind, but he couldn't afford to dwell on it. He had to focus on the task at hand, getting to Princess Alara. His footsteps echoed through the empty halls as he moved quickly. His mind filled with one thought. He couldn't let her remain hidden any longer. She deserved to be seen, to be free. He had made it through the trials, faced the danger, and now he was so close to reaching her. But the palace was not as simple as it seemed. Every corner seemed to hold secrets, and every door led to another challenge. Leo knew that if he was going to reach Alara, he would have to outsmart the guards and avoid the traps set by the Chandra. As he reached a large set of double doors, Leo paused. He could hear voices on the other side. He wasn't alone. He knew that the princess's chambers were just beyond this room, but he couldn't simply walk in. The guards were on high alert, and he couldn't risk being captured now. He had come too far. Taking a deep breath, Leo slipped quietly into the shadows and waited. The voices grew louder, and soon 2 guards passed by the door, their footsteps heavy on the stone floor. Leo waited until they were out of sight before slipping through the open door and into the room beyond. The room was grand, filled with rich tapestries and soft glowing lights that flickered in the darkness. At the far end of the room was another set of doors, ones that led directly into the chambers of the princess. Leo could see them now, but he knew he still had to be careful. There was no telling what kind of security awaited him inside. Leo moved quietly, his breath steady as he approached the doors. He had to be quick. He had to be silent. He placed his hand on the cool surface of the door and pushed gently. The door opened with a soft creak and Leo slipped inside. What he saw took his breath away. Princess Alara stood in the center of the room, her back to him. She was dressed in simple yet elegant robes, her long hair flowing down her back. But it was her face that captured Leo's attention. The veil was gone. For the first time, he saw her without the mask of mystery that had surrounded her for so long. Alara's face was as beautiful as the legends had promised. But there was more to her than just her appearance. Her eyes, though soft and serene, held a sadness that Leo couldn't ignore. She was not just a princess, locked away and hidden from the world. She was a person who had been abandoned, trapped by the expectations of her people. Leo could see the weight of it in her expression, the loneliness that had been her constant companion. "Alara," Leo said softly, his voice filled with awe and respect. "I've come for you." Alara turned to face him, her eyes widening slightly. As she saw him standing there, she didn't seem surprised, nor did she show fear. Instead, there was a quiet acceptance in her gaze, as if she'd been waiting for this moment for a long time. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You've made it past all the trials. That doesn't mean you can change anything. My people will never accept you." Leo took a step closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "I'm not here to change your people, Alara. I'm here to show you that you're more than just a symbol. You're a person, and you deserve to be seen for who you truly are." Alara's expression softened, but there was still a sadness in her eyes. "You don't understand. I've spent my whole life being hidden away, a prisoner of my own peoples. Traditions, they don't see me. They only see what they want to see. And you can't change that." Leo shook his head. "I don't need to change anyone. I only need to show you that you have a choice. You don't have to be trapped by their rules. You can choose for yourself. You deserve to live a life that's yours, not one that's been dictated to you." Alara stared at him as if considering his words. "But how? How can I choose when my people won't let me? How can I be free when they hold all the power?" Leo took another step forward, his voice filled with conviction. "You can be free by choosing to live for yourself, by not letting anyone else decide who you are or what you should be. The trials were never about proving anything to them. They were about proving to you that you are more than just a princess. You are a person with your own worth, your own voice. And if you choose to be free, I will stand by you." For a long moment, there was silence. Alara's eyes searched Leo's face, as if looking for something, perhaps the truth, in his words. She seemed torn, uncertain of what to believe. But then, she slowly took a step forward, her gaze unwavering. "I don't know if I can believe." In that, she whispered, "I've spent my whole life believing that I had no choice, but maybe it's time I did." Leo smiled softly, his heart swelling with hope. "It's never too late to choose, Alara. You've always had the power. You just need to see it for yourself." As she stood there, the weight of her past seemed to lift, just a little. It wasn't gone, not completely. But for the first time, she allowed herself to hope. She allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could be free. "I'll go with you," Alara said, her voice strong. "I will choose my own path." Leo's smile widened as he stepped closer to her. "Then let's go. It's time for both of us to be free." Together, they moved toward the doors, ready to face whatever came next. They weren't just running away from the past. They were walking toward a future they could choose for themselves. Leo and Alara walked side by side, their path illuminated by the soft glow of lanterns hanging along the palace corridors. There was a new energy between them, something that had not been there before. Alara, who had spent so many years in the shadows, hidden away from the world, now felt as if she were stepping into the light. It wasn't just about escaping the palace. It was about choosing her own future, one where she wasn't defined by the weight of tradition or or the expectations of her people. Leo could see the change in her. Her steps were lighter, her posture straighter. For the first time, she wasn't looking over her shoulder, worried about who might be watching. She was focused ahead, and for the first time, Leo saw hope in her eyes. "You're really going to leave?" Leo asked quietly, glancing at Alara as they walked. "The palace, your people, everything you've known?" Lara's eyes flickered toward him. "I'm not leaving everything behind, Leo. I'm choosing to live for myself. Not running away from my pastime, choosing a future that's mine. I've been trapped in a life that I didn't want. Now, I'm going to find my own way." Leo nodded, his heart swelling with pride. He had come here to prove that Alara deserved to be seen, to be free, and now he was seeing that belief come true. The princess, who had once been a symbol of mystery and constraint, was now standing up for herself, ready to make her own choices. He had never imagined that this journey would lead him here, but now it felt right. As they neared the exit of the palace, sounds of the world outside grew louder, and the fresh air seemed to beckon them. But there was one final obstacle they had to face: the Zandari Council. The council, the governing body of the Zandari people, had ruled for centuries. They held the power over Alara's life, and to defy them was to risk everything. Leo knew that if they left now, they would be hunted, branded as traitors, and perhaps worse. The council would never allow Alara to walk away from the life they had planned for her. "They won't let us go," Leo said, stopping for a moment and turning to face Alara. "The council will do everything in their power to stop us." Alara's face was calm, her eyes full of resolve. "I know, but they can't control me anymore. I'm not a prisoner, Leo. I'm a person, and I have the right to choose." Leo smiled at her bravery. He had seen courage in battles and soldiers who fought with strength and determination, but there was something different about Alara's courage. It was quiet, steady, and deeply rooted in the truth of who she was. It wasn't the courage to fight, but the courage to be free. Together, they pushed open the palace doors, stepping out into the night. The cool air filled their lungs, and for a moment they stood there, breathing in the freedom that seemed so impossible just days ago. The palace behind them was a symbol of everything they had overcome, but ahead of them lay an unknown future, a future they would face together as they walked toward the palace gates. Leo heard the sounds of footsteps behind them. The guards. They had been waiting for this moment, and now it was here. "Stop!" A voice shouted from behind them. Leo turned to see a group of guards approaching, led by none other than Yarrick. His former ally, now an enemy, stood tall and confident, his hand resting on the hilt of his weapon. "You cannot leave, Alara," Yarrick said, his voice cold. "You belong to the council. You will return with us, or we will force you." Leo stepped forward, standing in front of Alara, his body tense. He wasn't afraid. He had faced many enemies before, but none like this. This wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a fight for freedom, for the right to choose one's own path. "You don't have to do this, Yarrick," Leo said, his voice steady. "But we're not here to fight. We're here to choose our own." Yarrick's expression hardened. "You're a fool, Leo. You think you can change everything with a few words? Council will not let you go." Lara stepped forward, her eyes locked on Yarrick. "I am not yours to control. Don't belong to the council, and I don't belong to anyone but myself. I'm leaving, and there is nothing you can do to stop me." For a moment, the world seemed to stop. The guards, the palace, the night, everything was still. And then something unexpected happened. Yarrick's expression softened, just slightly. He looked at Alara, not with the coldness he had shown before, but with something else, a recognition, perhaps, the courage she had found within herself. "You're making a mistake," Yarrick said, his voice quieter now. "But I can see that you've already made your decision." Leo stepped forward again, his eyes never leaving Yarrick's. "We've made our decision, and we won't go back." There was a long pause before Yarrick sighed. "Then go," he said. "But know this, Alara, you will never truly be free. The council will come for you." Alara nodded, her face calm. "Then I will be ready." As Yarick and the guards stepped back, Leo and Alara turned and continued their journey. The night air filled with the promise of a new beginning. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in her life, Alara was free to choose what came next. And with Leo by her side, she knew she would face whatever challenges lay ahead. With courage and hope in her heart, the dawn of a new day broke over the horizon as Leo and Alara continued their journey. They had walked away from the palace, from the life that had been chosen for her, and toward a future that was entirely their own. The city behind them seemed so distant now, like a dream fading in the morning light. But ahead of them lay an unknown world, full of both possibility and danger. For the first time, Alara felt free. The weight that had held her down for so many years was gone. She had made her choice, and with Leo by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next. They were no longer just a princess and a soldier. They were two people, united by a shared belief in freedom and the courage to choose their own paths. "Where do we go now?" Alara asked, breaking the silence between them as they walked side by side. She had never truly thought about life outside the palace walls. It had always seemed impossible, a dream that could never come true. But now, the world was full of endless possibilities, and the future was theirs to shape. Leo glanced at her, a warm smile crossing his face. "Wherever you want," he said simply. "We can go anywhere. This is your choice now." Alara looked ahead, her heart light with excitement. For the first time in her life, she didn't have to answer to anyone. She didn't have to be the perfect princess, confined to the traditions of her people. She could just be herself as they walked. Leo explained how he had seen many places during his travels, far beyond the borders of Zandari. He spoke of distant worlds, strange civilizations, and the people he had met along the way. Alara listened intently, her curiosity growing. She had lived such a sheltered life, and now there was so much to learn, so much to experience. "I've always wanted to see the stars," Alara said softly, her eyes reflecting the vast sky above them. "But I never thought I'd be free enough to explore them." "You're free now," Leo replied, his voice full of confidence. "And there's a whole universe waiting for you." Alara smiled, a sense of excitement growing within her. It was hard to believe how far she had come in such a short time. Just days ago, she had been trapped in a palace, bound by the expectations of her people. Now, she was walking through the world with Leo. Free to choose her own destiny, they continued their journey. Walking through forests and over hills, heading toward a small village on the outskirts of the city. It was a quiet place, far from the reach of the Zandari Council and the palace that had once held Alara captive. They needed to rest, to plan their next move. They couldn't stay on the road forever. But for now, they were content. They had each other, and that was enough. As they reached the village, they were greeted by friendly faces. The villagers were curious about the strangers, but they welcomed them with open arms. Leo and Alara stayed in the village for several days, resting and gaining their strength. During their time there, they learned that the people of this place were not so different from those they had left behind. The villagers had their own customs and traditions, but they lived simple, peaceful lives. Alara found herself fascinated by the way they lived without the burdens of power or status, just focusing on their families and their land. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Leo spoke of his past. He had come from a family of soldiers, trained for battle and war. He had spent much of his life fighting for causes he didn't always believe in, following orders without question. But everything had changed when he met Alara. She had shown him that there was more to life than following orders. There was freedom in choosing one's path, in standing up for what was right. "I never thought I'd find something like this," Leo said, his eyes meeting Alara's. "I've spent my whole life fighting, but now I'm fighting for something worth fighting for. I'm fighting for you, for your future, for the choice we have." Alara smiled, her heart full. "I never knew I had the power to choose my own life. But now that I do, I know that I want to be with you. I want to see the world, to experience everything it has to offer." Leo's hand found hers, and for a moment, they sat in silence, watching the fire crackle and burn. The world seemed peaceful here, in this small village, and for the first time in her life, Alara felt like she could truly breathe. The next morning, they left the village knowing that their journey was far from over. But Alara wasn't afraid. With Leo by her side, she knew they could face whatever came next. They were no longer bound by the past. They were free to create their own future. As they walked down the road, Leo turned to her and said, "Where to next?" Lara looked ahead, a smile playing on her lips. "Wherever the road takes us," she said. "The future is ours to choose." And with that, they continued their journey, hand in hand, ready to face whatever the world had to offer, together.